So now that we're here in Peru, we really need to plan the Peruvian wedding. I love you, baby. Do you know that?
I think so.
Baby, my beautiful Mahogany, the train is already going too fast to stop. Let's just dance.
Awesome! 90 Day Diaries recently brought us an unexpected episode. It was an update on a couple we hadn't seen in quite a while, and that couple was Ben and Mahogany. Yeah, these two are still together, and they don't look so good. Like, what in the strung out hell is going on here? If you haven't seen these two weirdos before, I will explain who they are. But if you do remember them from the show, this 90 Day Diaries coverage of them is surprising. I had a really hard time believing that they were even a real couple when they first appeared on season 5 of Before the 90 Days, and I had an even harder time believing that we would ever see them again. Even more so after I listened to Ben's recent interview on a podcast. The Sarah Fraser Show posted a podcast interviewing Ben on January 28th. I will talk more about that later in this video, but if you want to listen to the full interview with Ben, the podcast link is in the description of this video. If you have already listened to it, Ben sounded pretty normal, I would say. I mean, as normal as Pastor Ben can, I guess. What I mean is that he seemed very aware of how bad him and Mahogany looked on the show, and he does not act like either of them would ever be back on TV again. He has a pretty good attitude and acknowledges that he made a lot of mistakes with Mahogany, the biggest being how he takes the blame for many of the awkward moments between the couple. He also explains a bit about his arrest and legal trouble, and we will get more into that interview and their current situation. But for those who need a refresher on this couple's story, it has been about 2 years since it aired. Let's take a quick look back at their season. Once upon a time, there was a creepy pastor who had fallen in love with a Snapchat filter. And we followed that pastor, Ben, to Peru, where he tried to track down the woman behind that filter. Most of us watching when this aired didn't think this woman, Mahogany, was real at all. We thought this guy was getting catfished, probably by another man in a completely different country. But Ben, finally, after a few failed attempts, met Mahogany in person for the very first time. Someone actually walked through that door.
You are real?
Oh my god!
A real woman who looked sort of like her pictures. It was a big surprise for everyone watching. She had very filtered and face-tuned photos, but she was real. But the magic didn't last long, because even though Ben claimed that him and Mahogany were soulmates, there was a very obvious awkwardness during their interactions.
I love you so much.
Was it a lack of chemistry? Was it the age gap? Was it the fact that Ben came to Peru and stalked Mahogany in her hometown? Maybe all of the above? But nothing could stop Ben from trying very hard to pursue Mahogany. He even wrote her this terrifying train story to express how he felt.
It was a runaway train, every passenger's nightmare, except one couple sitting across from each other. Vamos a bailar. People were laughing now and clapping in time as the talented couple whirled up and down the aisle. The old train came off the wheels. Baby, my beautiful Mahogany, the train is already going too fast to stop. Let's just dance.
Yikes. This story seems even creepier 2 years later. I mean, really, who could blame Mahogany from trying to hide from Ben and his train stories when he came to Peru? And that was something that made their story even more and more uncomfortable. Ben, at 52 years old, was pushing meetups and saying that 24-year-old Mahogany was the one.
Hey!
But Mahogany was acting like this relationship was not serious.
I traveled 4,000 miles to be with her, and all of a sudden, I'm not even her boyfriend.
And she started to get caught in some random lies, like claiming this Airbnb was her apartment when it wasn't. It was probably for her more of a safety thing than anything else. I mean, look at this guy. And she was also lying about her age. Mahogany was really 22 years old.
A pesar de la edad que ella tiene, 22 años.
22?
And that realization seemed to bring Ben back down to earth a little bit.
I've got a daughter who's 22, so...
This relationship wasn't the fantasy he thought it was. There were moments when they seemed to be acting like a couple, but anytime Ben confronted Mahogany about her random lying, like the apartment and her age, the awkwardness intensified. In the end, this guy went to Peru to stalk a young girl that just wasn't very interested in him.
Quiero subir a un carro y irme. Ahora.
But he kept trying very hard to make this work because
God's plan.
when he left, I really thought that this was over. It was done. She wasn't interested. But the season 5 tell-all proved me to be wrong. These two were still together. And it was also revealed that Ben really did stalk Mahogany in her hometown. She did not want him to come see her with cameras. And he showed up anyways, with cameras. And then he went back to Peru after the show stopped filming to track her down again.
Chasing her and knowing that she's so young, I don't know, but it gives me like pervert vibes.
Yes! But somehow, after all of this avoiding and hiding from Ben, these two were also claiming that they had plans to get married.
Mahogany and I, 1 year from now, will be back here in this park
Yes.
as husband and wife.
Oh my gosh, baby.
That's my prediction.
It was odd, felt fake. It couldn't be real. I thought this girl was literally hiding where she lived from Ben and her real age from Ben for safety reasons. And yet here they were. They were saying they were going to get married. So I thought that this was just a performance they put on for the tell-all, maybe to try to make them look less like idiots, even though it didn't help. But then now here we are, almost 2 years later, seeing them together again. And Mahogany still looks like she's questioning her life choices. But something that did come up on the tell-all came up again on the podcast interview with Ben. It was the comment Mahogany made about Ben lying about filming when he came to meet her. So now that we've strolled down memory lane and relived the terrible train story, let's talk about that podcast. Again, the Sarah Fraser Show on Apple Podcasts talked to Ben before this 90 Day Diaries episode came out. So you can go watch that podcast with the link in the description. Please go listen to that interview if you can. I thought it was an interesting listen. I did not have a chance to ask permission to post any of the sound bites from the podcast, so I will just explain some of the key points. But basically, Ben on the podcast explains that he was talking to Mahogany before the show, and he claims that their relationship wasn't set up by the show. He joined the show wanting to meet Mahogany in person, and he thought that this was a chance to show their love story to the world. He said that he had emailed the show, they did not approach him, and he says that he was the one that pushed the relationship and filming it, but Mahogany did not want Ben to come meet her with a bunch of cameras. He said that he would not show up with cameras, but then he did show up to force meeting her with cameras. So he says that her trying to hide from him or avoid him was because she didn't want cameras on them. To me, this explains the Airbnb she said was her home, the awkwardness, not showing up, her parents hating Ben. Well, at least partially. He's still a creep, and I'm sure him being over 50 also made her parents hate him. Mahogany was also not on the podcast, so remember this is also his side of the story. He also talks about his arrest and the details of his whole charge of operating a vehicle with the presence of drugs in his system in 2020. That is the story where he claims that homeless people gave him a drink that drugged him. Mahogany also had something happen where she accidentally OD'd. She said that she was taking a medication to help with her daily routine and then accidentally overdosed on it. Anyways, after listening to that podcast, I thought, okay, Ben says that the show was embarrassing. There was even something that came up about him saying that they approached him for 90 Day Diaries, but he had no plans on going back on TV since he had some regrets doing the Before the 90 Days show. I mean, this guy got fired from his job after the details of his arrest came out. If he was not on the show, I doubt that would have been broadcasted all over the internet. But then here he was on 90 Day Diaries. And if he's trying to look better on TV than before, redeem himself, he's not.
I am at the blood bank. I'm going to make some donations, and I need to make some money.
Now, Ben says that he hasn't had a good job in 6 months and money is really tight. But not only did Ben and Mahogany actually get engaged, they also had a civil ceremony in Peru and are married. And now Ben is doing everything he can to make some money because these two have a very big goal.
The plan has always been to get Mahogany to the United States, but because finances have been so tough, we've not been able to get the visa.
I don't know why this shocked me as much as it did when I watched this the first time, but it did. I thought this whole thing was fake, even after listening to the podcast. But yeah, I guess it's not. I will say, though, that even though they are married, I'm not buying that Mahogany is still very interested in Ben.
Just do that and show me, because if you don't show me interest, everybody lost interest, right?
And she seems frustrated with his current financial situation. So she is 23 now, married to someone 30 years older than her. But this guy, 30 years older than her, is struggling to support them.
I'm gonna give it to you.
And if I change my mind?
To marry me?
Yeah.
I would be heartbroken.
I really don't think that this went how she thought it would. And what kind of life is this guy going to provide for her exactly? Also, he has a daughter the same age as Mahogany too. Would he want this for his daughter? I doubt it. And they just don't look well. He seemed to sound pretty put together when he was talking on the podcast. This feels different. Like, is this from stress or something else? And when Ben had already acknowledged that they look bad on their Before the 90 Days season, why would he come back on here like this? Desperate for money, I guess? And was this the only way that Mahogany would be on camera? That's probably why he had to look for her in a crowd again when he arrived, even though they are freaking married. She still does not trust that he will show up without cameras. Jeez. Whatever is going on, I still don't get the vibe that these two are good for each other. While I think Mahogany was comfortable with being supported by Ben, I don't think she will stick around if his financial issues get any worse. Look at her, she's teetering on the edge of hiding from him again, but this time for good. And I think that Ben thinks that this is it for him and it has to work out. So he's forcing it like he's done from the beginning. But look at her, she hates him.
I love you, baby. Do you know that?
I think so.
She hates his guts.
Mike the House Elf wants to remind you to subscribe to this channel.
Has given Dobby a shock. Dobby is free.
If you don't, he will appear in your room tonight to tell you he loves you.
So overall, this couple's train wreck of a relationship has been a lot like that train story. These two are just dancing while the train can't stop moving and is about to go over a cliff. Who knew that that story would be foreshadowing of their future? But the difference from that story and their story is that no one is clapping and cheering for them. Everyone is just watching, concerned, and possibly planning an intervention. So I want to know what you think about this couple, and if you were as surprised as I was that they are back on our screens and married and trying to get Mahogany to the US. We will have to see if they really do show up on another season, if they really are desperate enough to do that. Maybe we will see them on Happily Ever After or Intervention. Again, let me know what you think and I will see you in the next video. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye!